Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Well, here we are, as promised. In accordance with your request, I'm going to begin today a discussion of the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24 and 25. Now, I warned you, this is going to take a while. It is absolutely critical that we have a proper understanding of the Olivet Discourse. I truly believe that Matthew 24 and 25 serves as the fountain for all New Testament eschatology. I do not believe that any of the epistles say anything different from what Jesus taught in Matthew 24 and 25. The great debate down through the centuries has been, in Matthew 24 and 25, does Jesus speak of one subject, i.e., the end of the Old Covenant age? Or, number two, does he speak of two subjects, the fall of Jerusalem, which occurred in AD 70, as well as the so-called end of time, the end of the current Christian age? Or, third point, does the Olivet Discourse, with the exception of just a couple of verses in Luke chapter 21, have to do strictly and solely with Jesus' coming at the end of the current Christian age, which is the dispensational view, by the way? And so I think you can see that it is, number one, there are various views on the Olivet Discourse. Now, in my last two videos, I've been sharing with you some thoughts in response to Brock Hollett's book, Debunking Preterism, and showing where Mr. Hollett's claims on Matthew 24, I have to tell you, are literally stunningly bad. They are so incredibly presuppositional, backed up with no proof whatsoever. Well, in our investigation of the Olivet Discourse, I'm going to do my best to demonstrate to you that Matthew 24 and 25, the entirety of the discourse, has to do with one subject. And that's the end of the Old Covenant age that occurred with the dissolution of the temple, and Jesus is coming on the clouds of glory in AD 70. If we establish that, it will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the book of Thessalonians, both books, are related to the same subject. Because Paul, in Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 13 and 14, says that what he was teaching on eschatology in that chapter, he got from the Lord. He was reminding them of what the Lord had said. Well, as I show in my book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, the Wedding of the King of Kings, in Paul's Thessalonian epistles, there are at least 22 direct linguistic parallels between the Olivet Discourse and Thessalonians. And by the way, some of those verbal parallels are the use of very, very rare Greek words. In other words, only Jesus uses them, and then only Paul uses them, speaking of the same subject. Well, okay, if we can identify what Jesus was talking about in the Olivet Discourse when he used those rare, distinctive Greek words, and when Paul is talking about the same identical subject and uses those same very rare and distinctive Greek words, then we've got some awfully powerful evidence that Paul's talking about the identical thing. Thus, if we can establish that the Olivet Discourse is about the coming of the Lord at the end of the Old Covenant age in AD 70, we thereby establish that Paul's Thessalonian epistles are about the coming of the Lord in AD 70. Likewise, the book of Revelation. Now, I'm excluding, not because there's nothing there, but I'm excluding for time purposes here, James and Peter, etc. But the book of Revelation, commentators have pondered for years and years and years. You have Matthew, Olivet Discourse. Mark, Olivet Discourse. Luke, Olivet Discourse. The Gospel of John, doesn't contain the Olivet Discourse. Why did John omit one of Jesus's major, if not the longest, discourses? Why did John ignore that? Well, he didn't. We have his discussion of the Olivet Discourse. It's called the Book of Revelation. And I will attempt to show you, through direct corollaries and parallels between the Olivet Discourse and Revelation, that they are, in fact, speaking of the same thing. And we'll be able to show that not only was Jesus talking about the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, but we'll also be able to show that John was as well, very clearly. We will show the perfect harmony, the perfect unity between the Olivet Discourse and Revelation and fulfillment in AD 70. Now, it's absolutely amazing to me. And by the way, there seems to be a growing sentiment, even among scholars, that the Olivet Discourse was in fact concerned with the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. That Jesus, in describing his coming, was using typical Old Covenant apocalyptic language. Pardon me. N.T. Wright, for instance, in his book, Jesus and the Victory of God, examining the language of the coming of Christ on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, concludes Jesus was not talking about some end-of-time event. He was using typical Hebraic language that communicated the idea of a cataclysmic national judgment. And he's not alone in that judgment. Other scholars have and are making the same conclusions. Now, the impact of this for our understanding of eschatology is absolutely incredible. If, in fact, number one, we establish that the entirety of the discourse is about the events leading up to and consummating in the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, then since Paul and Thessalonians, since Peter, since James, since John, since Revelation are all drawn from the Olivet Discourse, then guess what? That means that their eschatology is likewise about the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. This is an incredibly important study. I stand amazed. You know, down through the years, Kenneth Gentry has divided the Olivet Discourse. He says that verse 36 divides the subject from the fall of Jerusalem in verses 1 to 35, verse 36 all the way through chapter 25. That's the end of the world. Well, I believe that Mr. Gentry saw the train coming, and he actually began to equivocate. And he says, even if it could be proven that the entirety of the Olivet Discourse is about the Lord's coming in AD 70, it would not materially affect his eschatology. That's utter nonsense. Because, once again, if you prove that the Olivet Discourse and its entirety is about AD 70, that affects your entire eschatology. Now, Mr. Gentry has announced that he's currently working on trying to finalize a book on the Olivet Discourse in which he seems to take, once again, the firm stand that it is divided. I have offered to debate Kenneth Gentry on this very subject. I have tried to post a message on his blog. My messages do not get approved. Wonder why that is. I think I know why. Be that as it may, to suggest that even if the Olivet Discourse were about only one subject, that it would not affect a person's entire view of eschatology is absolutely specious. You will see that as we continue and proceed in this study. I hope you're going to enjoy this like I am. This is an incredible study. It is incredibly important. I will demonstrate to you that not only is Matthew 24 and 25 about AD 70, it's about the full arrival and glorification of the kingdom. It's predicted, by the way, in the section which even Kenneth Gentry agrees applied to AD 70, Jesus was predicting the resurrection of the dead. So if you admit that that section is AD 70, you are thereby agreeing and admitting that Jesus predicted the resurrection in AD 70. You're going to love this material. Hey, look, go to my website, order the book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings. In this book, I adduce those 22 direct parallels with charts, and you're going to be absolutely amazed to see the perfect correlation between Matthew 24 and 25, and I'm talking the first and so-called first and second sections, those sections that are admitted to be AD 70, those sections that are claimed to be future, and yet they all appear without distinction in Paul's Thessalonian epistles. No distinction, no division. That's powerful stuff. So go to my website, get the book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings. Be sure to send me a note that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. Okay, thank you for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. I will see you on the flip side.